You think they keep you close because you matter. But sometimes, a person holds on to you, not because they love you, but because they're terrified of facing life without someone holding the space they're not ready to fill. You're not their person. You're their placeholder, the emotional crutch, the convenience, the soft landing, while they figure out their real intentions. And the most painful part, they may not even realize they're doing it, but you feel it, not through words, but through the silence between them. You feel it in the way they pull you close when they're lonely, but push you away when they're okay again. You feel it in how they text you when nights feel heavy, but disappear when days feel light. You feel it in how they ask you to stay available emotionally, physically, mentally, yet never offer you commitment, clarity, or certainty in return. You feel it in how they love your presence, but don't fight for your future. They don't want to lose you, but they don't choose you. They're not building something with you. They're leaning on you while they figure out who they actually want to be with. And that's the silent cruelty. You are supporting someone who is preparing themselves for a love story you may not be invited into. They come to you for comfort, for validation, for emotional nutrition, but they give that emotional fulfillment to someone else. Maybe someone new, maybe someone from their past, maybe someone who exists only in their imagination. But it's not you, not fully. You are the safe place they run to when their other options collapse. You are the reassurance that they are still wanted, a reminder that they're still desirable, in case the person they truly want doesn't choose them back. And it's not because you're weak or because you're unworthy. It's because you're dependable, stable, emotionally intelligent, present, a sanctuary. And people who aren't healed don't know how to handle people who show up with full hearts. So instead of rising to meet that love, they store you like emotional insurance, a backup plan, a safety net, a piece they refuse to lose, but refuse to grow with. You're the emotional bridge between who they are and who they want to be, but they have no intention of crossing that bridge with you. They keep you close, so they never have to face what life feels like without someone holding space for their emotional needs. You're not a partner. You're an emotional placeholder, maintaining the position until their ideal future arrives. And it hurts because they don't push you away. They pull you close, just enough for you to stay, close enough to keep you attached, but distant enough to keep you empty. They don't offer closure because closure would set you free. They don't clarify their feelings because clarity would mean they'd have to take responsibility for how deeply they're using you. So they keep things undefined, confusing, warm but inconsistent, loving but non-committal, passionate but unavailable. They feed just enough affection to keep your heart alive, but never enough to bring it to life. They want your presence without accountability, your loyalty without a promise, your effort without investment. They want access to you without choosing you. And the cruel truth is, this pattern doesn't end when they figure themselves out. It ends when you finally do, because one day you'll realize you're not waiting for them. You're delaying someone real, someone who doesn't need a placeholder, someone who sees you not as a bridge, but as the destination. And when you finally walk away, they'll call you selfish, cold, heartless, disloyal, changed. But the truth is, you just stopped applying love where it was never meant to bloom. You stopped pouring into a future they never intended to grow. You stopped holding space for someone who never planned to fill it. You stayed because you believed. They just needed time. Time to heal. Time to grow. Time to choose you properly. But here's the hard truth. Most people never want to face. Some people don't need time. They need maturity. They need accountability. They need courage. And time alone doesn't give people that. Time doesn't change hearts. Responsibility does. And if someone is using you as emotional scaffolding while they build a future you don't get to live in, time will only stretch the pain because they're getting more comfortable with a version of love that drains you, and you're getting more attached to a version of love that will never arrive. They tell you they care. They tell you they're trying. They tell you they're not ready. But notice this. They are not ready for commitment, yet they're always ready for intimacy. They are not ready to define the relationship, yet they're ready to rely on you like you're already in one. They are not ready to choose you, but they're very ready to lose their mind if you start pulling away. They want the benefits without the title, the comfort without the responsibility, the emotional security without emotional reciprocity. Because if they choose you fully, they lose the freedom to explore other options. And they're not done exploring. You're the safe option, the consistent one, the one they know will still be there when the world stops clapping for their indecision. So they string you along with almost feelings, almost vulnerability, almost commitment, almost timing, but almost love is emotional starvation disguised as patience. And you deserve more than being loved halfway. You deserve someone who chooses you fully the first time, not when they run out of people to choose. Someone who doesn't need to lose you to realize your value. Someone who doesn't mistake your presence as proof that you'll never leave. Someone who sees your worth in the moment it's offered, not in the moment it's gone. But people who use placeholders aren't thinking about your future. They're thinking about their comfort. It's not that they don't feel anything. They do. They just feel more entitled to be cared for than responsible for caring back. You became their emotional home, but they still want the thrill of wandering. You became the heart they depend on while they save their best self for someone else. Not because that someone else is better, but because that person requires less work. Loving you demands growth. Loving you demands vulnerability. Loving you demands effort. And they're scared of the version of themselves they'd have to become to love you properly. So instead of rising, they settle for keeping you close in the easiest way possible. Just enough connection to keep you tied. Just enough affection to keep you hopeful. Just enough honesty to avoid guilt. Just enough distance to avoid responsibility. It's love without depth, attachment without intention, dependency without commitment. And every time you stay, you teach them that this level of effort is enough. You teach them that they don't have to grow to keep you. You teach them that your love requires no transformation, just presence. But real love is not maintenance. It's movement. It's two people evolving toward each other, not one growing alone, while the other holds on to who they were. The moment you stop accepting crumbs, the dynamic changes. The moment you stop making excuses for their emotional laziness, the dynamic changes. The moment you stop showing up every time they snap their fingers, the dynamic changes. Because suddenly, you're no longer the placeholder. You're a person who requires effort, and effort exposes truth. If they step up, you weren't asking too much. They were giving too little. If they pull away, it was never love. It was dependency. Your boundaries don't push real love away. They push fake love away. You don't lose the right person by demanding effort. You lose the person who never intended to give any. And when that happens, don't chase, don't beg, don't prove your value. Just walk, because you're not losing them. You're making space for someone who doesn't need to get ready to love you properly. You didn't end up as their placeholder because you were weak. You ended up there because you loved deeply, because you believed in potential, because you saw the best in them, even when they weren't showing it, because you are loyal in a world full of temporary people. But here's the part most people never realize: being a placeholder is not about your worth, it's about their readiness. Some people only know how to love after they've broken someone who loved them right. Some people only learn commitment after sabotaging the one person who showed up with pure intentions. Some people only understand value after losing what was valuable. And you became their lesson, not their partner, not because you weren't enough, but because you were more than they knew how to receive. They weren't choosing better, they were choosing easier. Someone who doesn't challenge them, someone who doesn't mirror their flaws, someone who doesn't require growth. Because when a person hasn't healed, they don't chase love, they chase comfort. They don't chase depth, they chase distraction. They don't chase connection, they chase convenience. And you are not convenient. You are meaningful. You are intense. You are life-changing. And people who aren't ready for depth run from anything that reminds them they aren't living honestly. So they keep you close enough to feel loved, but far enough to avoid accountability, close enough to receive, far enough to never give, close enough to call you when they're lonely, but far enough to ignore you when they're satisfied, close enough to borrow your heart, but far enough to never return it. They want your energy without offering identity. They want your presence without offering place. They want your devotion without offering direction. You became home, but they still acted homeless, not because you failed, but because they refused to stay where they feel seen. You see their wounds, you see their patterns, you see the parts they hide, and being seen like that is terrifying to someone who built their entire identity on avoiding themselves. That's why they treat you like a backup plan, not because you're second choice, but because you are the real choice. And the real choice comes with real responsibility. And deep down, they know you won't settle for half love. They know you won't tolerate immaturity, avoidance, or emotional shortcuts. They know that choosing you means becoming someone better, and they're not sure they're ready to be better. So instead, they choose someone who won't demand that, not someone stronger than you, someone safer for their fears, someone who doesn't trigger reflection, someone who doesn't challenge growth, someone who doesn't require effort. You weren't left behind. You were avoided. And there's a difference. Being avoided is not rejection. It's avoidance of responsibility. But here's what shifts everything. When you stop showing up without being chosen, you stop being a placeholder and become a loss. When you stop giving effort without commitment, you stop being familiar and become unforgettable. When you stop offering love where love isn't given back, you stop being convenient and become irreplaceable because you're not holding space. You're taking it back. You're not waiting. You're moving. You're not hoping. You're healing. You're not holding them up. You're holding yourself. And that shift is what makes people realize, too late, what they had while they're out there, chasing temporary highs. You're becoming permanent peace. While they're choosing comfort, you're choosing growth. And growth will always outlast distraction. One day, they will look back and realize the person they left for space, was the only person who ever offered them a future. Not because you'll still be waiting, but because you'll already be gone. You won't beg. You won't prove. You won't explain. You will simply no longer be available to people who only value you once they lose you. And that's the moment they stop seeing you as a placeholder and start seeing you as the person they wish they had chosen. But by then, you won't need the apology. You won't need the closure. You won't need the return, because you'll finally understand. You were never asking for too much. You were asking for the wrong person. You're not meant to stay where your heart is only borrowed. You're not meant to wait for someone to finally recognize what was obvious from the beginning. You weren't created just to fill the silence between their real priorities. You weren't made to hold space for someone who refuses to step into it. You were made to be chosen, not kept on standby. And here's the truth: most people never grasp until it's too late. The moment you stop being available is the moment they realize you were never replaceable, because placeholders leave no mark. But you did. Placeholders blur into memory, but you stand out. Placeholders fade when they're gone, but you leave echoes. Because someone like you doesn't just touch a life, you change it. And losing someone who changes you is a heartbreak that lingers long after the goodbye. They'll go back to old habits, old people, old patterns, but it won't feel the same. Not after you. Because once someone experiences connection with depth, everything else feels hollow. Once they experience being understood without speaking, surface level attention feels cheap. Once they experience a love that holds them accountable, a love that expects nothing, breaks them instead of healing them, they'll try to fill the space you left with noise, messages, situationships, party nights, new faces, but nothing touches the void made by someone who was once home. You were not a placeholder. They were a lesson in who not to choose, a lesson in what love is not, a lesson in what you refuse to tolerate anymore. Because someone who truly chooses you won't keep you close only when they're lonely. They'll choose you when they're healed, when they're ready, when they're present. They'll choose you because they want you, not because you're convenient. And that's where your power is, not in proving your worth, but in protecting it, not in chasing answers, but in becoming the answer to your own healing, not in asking them to choose you, but in choosing yourself first. You don't need to convince anyone that you were the right one. You simply need to become unavailable to people who cannot show up as the right one for you, because the person meant for you won't make you feel like a placeholder. They'll make you feel like a priority. They'll meet you where you are. They'll match your effort. They'll bring clarity, not confusion. They won't leave you questioning. They'll leave you grounded. They won't ask for space just to return when they're bored. They'll grow with you in the space you build together. That's the love you deserve, not temporary comfort, disguised as affection, not emotional crumbs, disguised as interest, not proximity without commitment. You deserve a love that shows up fully, a love that stays, a love that chooses. And maybe the only reason you were their placeholder was to finally realize you deserve better than someone who only holds you halfway. And when that realization settles in you, something powerful shifts. You don't fear losing them. You fear losing yourself, trying to keep them. That's the moment you walk away, not with anger, but with clarity, not with resentment, but with wisdom, not to prove anything, but because you finally see you were never the one waiting. You were the one worth arriving for. And the one who can meet you there, they're not behind you. They're ahead of you. but you'll only meet them once you stop holding space for someone who never intended to stay there. So here's your shift. Stop carrying people who refuse to walk beside you. Stop offering depth to people swimming in shallow water. Stop making excuses for someone who only chooses you when it's convenient, and start choosing yourself the way you once chose them, not to punish them, but to save yourself. Because one day, they will understand what they lost, but by then, you'll have already found what you deserve. If this spoke to you, hit subscribe, because you deserve content that reminds you of your value, not your wounds. And if you're healing right now, just drop this in the comments. I choose myself now. Let's make that your new beginning.